Thank you for tuning into this special episode of NetGain with Bart Huber from Yeti Software. Any NetGain listeners, use the promo code NG25, that's NG25, to get your first month free with Yeti Software. That's for you listening to NetGain, promo code NG25 for your first month free when you sign up with Yeti Software. Now, let's get into the show. NetGain, networking, encouragement, and training. Brought to you by Jack of All People Trades, helping snow and landscape companies recruit, train, and retain the best employees. Welcome to NetGain, networking, encouragement, and training. I'm Evan Tashwire, Jack of All People Trades, your host. Got a very special guest with me today, Bart Huber from Yeti Software. So, Bart, talk to the people. Tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do with Yeti.
Thanks a lot for having me on, Evan. Yeah, I work with Yeti Software. We provide operations management software to lawn care, landscaping, and snow removal companies. I work in sales at Yeti and used to do quite a bit of the customer success and onboarding as well.
100%. So awesome that you're in sales, been in customer success, onboarding, really helping customers with software and snow and landscape work smarter. And for those watching video, this is my dog Case right here. Say hi. So we bring him on. He sits in my lap. So yeah, he's actually named. I will dovetail this. He's actually named after the snow company Case. So for those who haven't heard the story, I'll put it on the podcast officially. Some in the industry know, but when I was full time in snow and ice, our company ownership used to, if you remember at ASCA when they had the rankings every year of like top sales or whatever, it was always like, why are we behind Case? What would Case do? What does Case do different? And my boss one day was like, why is he always so focused on Case? And I jokingly spotted off, if I ever get a dog, I'm going to name him Case so he can tell us what we should do. So in that case, Case, tell Bart and I what we should do on the podcast today. Oh, you're so sweet, buddy. So that's the story behind Case. And, it's kind of, now that I'm consulting in the industry, it really is the joke that keeps on giving. Like I've shown him to Case Construction, Case in Boston. So they all know about him. But one thing I always start NetGain with, and I hope that gave people a laugh, but I always start NetGain with an encouragement. So I want to do something to really uplift the snow company. So this will be coming out here probably in November of 25 going into the winter. So I do want to lay the encouragement out of just, take care of yourself and give grace to yourself. So I know we're busy this time of year, especially can be really busy. You feel the extra push to do that one extra or 10 extra things that you feel you need to do or maybe do need to do. But I do encourage you to, just take one thing that you say you're going to put in your calendar for yourself, whether it's I'm going to take a walk, get some exercise in, I'm going to make sure I read, I'm going to take extra time to pack meals that are healthy, really do one thing for you and even do, things for you that are kind to yourself as well, because in this time it can be very easy to be hard on people and hard on self. So want to say, set aside time for something for you to invest in you, and then also be kind to yourself in how you speak and giving yourself grace and, giving yourself those self high fives for what you do. Bart, anything you'd add to that encouragement?
That's a great point. We're all coming up on a pretty tough time of the year. Mistakes are going to happen. Bad things will, eventually happen too that you don't necessarily plan for. And just keep in mind that that's happening to everybody. No matter how much you plan, the unplanned will occur. So,
yeah,
it's a good point.
And that's one thing I love about these encouragements is I feel like every time I do one and ask like, what would you say about it? I almost always get back either a really good story to build on it or something like you did with kind of another point of no matter how much you prep, mistakes will happen. So just having that mindset and, from there, what can you learn from it and what can you pivot to from it from a human perspective? So rather than the mistakes being something you kind of crush with a hammer, it's like, let's all come together and, introspect. All right, what happened here? Walk us through it. Let's take accountability and let's learn and use it as an experience. Maybe we got hit with something we didn't expect. Maybe we didn't do something we standardly, usually do. Whatever it is, let's really look at that. But yeah, thank you for that encouragement. So first we're going to jump into, why I had you on this episode, obviously to, introduce my audience to Yeti software and, what you do. So I guess for people who aren't familiar with Yeti or, need, want to be refamiliarized, just give a high level of, what Yeti is and who the ideal customer is for it.
Yeah, Yeti is an operations management software platform. So if you are wondering kind of what you would do with Yeti, if you have no familiarity with it, you would be able to, a user in the field could, grab all of the site information. So the services performed, they could take photos, they could clock in and clock out. And then on the back end of that, what you'll be able to see on the web is all of that information, and we'll package that up for you and we'll store it forever. So you'll have service verification, but then you'll also have the reports that you need to create, bills for your clients and, bills for yourself if you're using subcontractors, employee payroll. So when we say operations management, that's kind of what we mean is the work after you get the contract from your client. Our ideal client is in snow, that is a part of their business. We were built for, I would say snow first. Our CEO, Kevin, used to own a snow removal company. That's what he knew better than anything else. So that's kind of where we started. But since then, now kind of by accident, so many of our users were using it year round. We started designing more and more tools that could work year round. So we do have some items that cater more specifically now to lawn care and landscaping than they would snow. For instance, we have a calendar tool. I wish you could use a calendar tool during snow season. It just doesn't always work that way. It would be great to schedule it out, but you can't. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing right now, and who we cater toward.
100%. So it sounds like definitely the, snow first, either snow only or snow first is really an ideal client. And that's cool that you do have the CEO that is also, comes from snow. So he's not just a, software guy who got in this to give us software, but he has that boots on the ground experience, knows what it's like to be and also manage the contractors.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's there are just good, bad, or otherwise. There are some problems that you face as a snow removal company that are just so unique to our industry. So it's a little bit more like fighting a fire than it is like mowing lawn, and so there is some built-in, I think most people would recognize it and say so as well. There's just some built-in flexibility that you wouldn't necessarily find in every platform.
No, and that's really good because, like you said, I think the firefighting analogy is really there because just like a fire, you don't know necessarily when they're going to strike. Obviously we have weather forecasts, but those can vary
Sure.
with a lot, but you don't know exactly when, what's going to shift. You don't even know when you get there. Like you said, like with a fire, if you think about it, if a fire catches an accelerant within a structure, it's going to get a lot worse or it's going to spread somehow or, an external wind or whatever. I think that analogy applies to snow as well because you never know based on what's going to happen or even what's happening on a site. If there's a, say, big rush, opening movie night and you've got a storm that comes in and hits and you've got a bunch of, teenage young adult drivers coming in that maybe aren't paying attention or kind of, I wasn't the best driver when I was not wasn't bad, but you're bumping your music, you're young, wild and free, so to speak, and you're not thinking like, hey, this snow that's coming down, I need to really be, going 15 miles an hour, eyes on a swivel, like when I'm in this lot, because, I'm in a car, I could kill somebody, and
Exactly. Yep.
so I think there's a lot of variables in that really can hit. So, kind of how has that, being that your owner, Kevin, has been in snow before, how is, from what you've seen with him and Yeti and other softwares, how has that given kind of a different edge, both to the software and even to how you do business as a company?
Well, I think as far as how we do business goes, we understand some of the challenges, some of those unique challenges, and we remain extremely flexible around our scheduling. We understand a lot of this work is happening at night. We understand you're going to have to maybe make a few phone calls to us after what would be considered regular business hours. We've been there. We get it. We can be as flexible as we need to be. Um, even our development team, which has admittedly and by design no interaction, directly with the client, um, they also understand we're not going to push out a brand new tool that could affect the way the platform works in the end of November. We're not going to do a massive release in December. Um, you just kind of have to let the product be what it is until after March. And I think that's a good thing. Every year there's requests from new users or even from current users. And if we get that request in the middle of December or January, good, bad, or otherwise, we have to just kind of say, hey, look, it's got to wait. I mean, it could affect what you're asking to do could affect the way someone else is currently using the platform. And the last thing we want to do when someone hasn't slept for the last 2 days is then throw a wrench in their plan to do something on Yeti the following day. We don't want to cause frustration and confusion. Um, so that's been massively helpful, just to be able to meet them where they are. And then, and this is again, I don't know that this is necessarily unique to Yeti, but for a lot of platforms in the green and snow space, you can tell what background the founder had. I mean, you can go onto the platform and you can pretty much say this person was in landscaping, this person wasn't hardscaping, this person, they did tree work. Pretty quickly based on some of the features and inclusions, just because the problems are unique in any industry. So I think just by messing around in the platform for a little bit, it's pretty clear to any of our new users that this was not just something where we hacked some ideas together. This was well thought out, and it came from a place of pain, unfortunately. Not having it is what created it.
Awesome. So yeah, no, that's really good. And that's a good insight about during the winter, not, flipping a bunch of things around because
Right.
that's especially with and I don't want to demean an audience by saying this, but even just we're used to familiarity as people.
Yeah.
So especially when you're in a fast moving firefighting field, you're counting on that standardization. So if they would wake up one morning, like you said, and be ready to invoice and all of a sudden they go in and, the invoicing, button or tabs or whatever aren't there or in a different place, like especially on sleep deprivation, that could totally throw you. And from a people side, I can say that, I'm a big proponent of Gallup's Q12 employee engagement survey, especially because of all the research they've done and shown the connection to business results. But one of the things they've shown over research of decades is their second question, Q2, which is I have the materials and equipment needed to do my job, when missing or wrong is the number one cause of employee frustration. So to your point, when they would go in there and they would see that something has been totally messed around, it's not just about the software and maybe you made something better for somebody else, but in that moment you've actually taken away or made the tool harder to use for
Yeah.
tons of other people, which is
Right.
not just about the tool. It rolls down to their engagement as people, and it really rolls back up then to that company owner who's using whatever the software is that did that, to say, hey, wait a second, like I don't have what I need to do my job. And it's almost like, you don't care. Same thing with any kind of equipment. If you're driving something that doesn't have, good brakes or the, pusher attachment's inconsistent or something always busts every time, the disengagement comes from it. So having those tools in place from a people perspective is really important, and I hope that encourages you in what you do, that it's not just about, I know sometimes on the software side, it can be like, oh, you don't get the you don't get to dance in the end zone, so to speak, in football terms. You get the flag thrown when it's not working. It's
That's
like
exactly right. And
so.
that's part of it. And the other thing too, there is, I think we are realistic about that as well, and we understand that there are probably many users of ours they didn't necessarily want to use the software. I don't think there's a lot of folks who don't necessarily they didn't wake up and say, "Man, this would really be cool if I could force all my employees to use an app instead of what they know." We are self-aware enough to understand that some people are using it because either their insurance company is asking them to implement something like this for verification, or their billing last year was just a complete mess, and this is kind of a last-ditch effort to see if they can improve that. then it's on us to make sure that the experience is a good one, and that this is not something that they constantly are worried about. It's not a constant headache of theirs. It's not causing problems for their employees. Like you just mentioned, it can become stressful for an employee to have to learn how to do something. Though we may think it's simple, it's tough for us sometimes to take a step back and not get lost in the weeds of it and admit we're around this every single day, 40 hours a week. This is all we talk about. It's all we think about. Our users, it's almost, I don't want to say an afterthought. That's not the right word, but it's not the main thing. To them, the work that they are doing is the main thing. This is a tool to help them, ideally. So we have to make sure it remains a tool that is simple and does not overwhelm not only the office staff, but the staff in the field.
Yeah, that's really good that you have that perspective. And that's one thing from a people side that, I teach leadership and talk about how important that knowing your audience is key, because knowing their context, knowing what they do and don't understand, what they are looking for, like you said, even knowing that, hey, you might have to use this software because, like you said, of billing or insurance or certain clients requiring, app and certain verifications. So it might not be, you might not even want to do this, but knowing that can kind of help you meet them on their ground. So, how have you kind of trained your team downwards on that to help them really understand the client's perspective?
Well, a big part of it for us is immediately, if you're going to be customer facing, we set up meetings with some of the clients that we currently have. If we have a new employee, they'll meet with people who are current users. And some of them may not be our happiest users by design. We want them to understand the pain that folks go through when they're using any software platform. And then we try to, as often as we can, to bring customer facing employees to trade shows. um, you and I met at SIMA. We were talking a little bit about that before we started recording. Um, that's a great opportunity to not just meet, current users, but also understand the problems that anyone in snow and ice is facing. And obviously, the trade shows are beyond just snow and ice. There's lawn care and landscaping specific shows that we attend to, but we try to not just bring one person anymore. We want to bring everybody on the team. If you're going to be onboarding somebody in the middle of February who's got, 200, 300 sites they're going to begin servicing on March 1st by their contract, we want to make sure that you understand how quickly that needs to happen, and what the pain looks like on the end of the user to get that up and running very quickly. So that's been very helpful, just to, because you don't necessarily always find employees from the industry, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're going to be bad, certainly not. But it helps to, they may have customer success or customer support experience, but maybe they don't have experience truly in the field of the client that you're serving. So to then try to get them as much experience as possible in that world, even though it may be simulated, is beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and one kind of close to my heart because I didn't come from the industry before. My background's on the HR people side. Before I came to snow removal, I was in higher education for a good bit, banking for a little bit, and then snow removal, and then since tech and specialty farm to diversify myself even more. But
Yeah.
yeah, coming from those, like I mean, honestly, walking in 2019 to, the snow and ice industry, like I couldn't have told you the difference between a plow and a pusher, a loader, a skid steer. If you put a brine tank in front of me, what liquid's in it? I don't know. You know what I mean? So I can
Right.
empathize with those who don't start. And especially from the recruiting side, one thing I'll be transparent on that I had to learn was what you said about timing is I
Yeah.
remember we had some self-perform employees that were in background checks and our owner's like, are we ready to go? I'm like, well, they're in background checks. Like, well, did you see the forecast? And from there it was like, okay, from now on, like that's what I have to have my eyes on because that's driving what we do. And so I
Right.
can't think, I was thinking, you know, business process of, well, here's the process and we go through this thing and then this, we go through background checks and pre-employment, then we go through onboarding. But it's like, okay, yes, we go through that, but we have to keep our eyes on this end goal here and be ready for that point in time. So that really helped build that. And I think probably for your team too, same thing of understanding, like if you're onboarding, okay, if someone's asking for this onboarding and it's like you said, mid-season or before the season, how is that going to affect? Because it's already snowing some, we're recording this on November 4th. It's already snowing some places as of now. It's, starting to, be in the forecast for other places. Contracts are starting. So yeah, I think that's a really good point you brought up on that. So wanted to kind of, I want to say pivot, but talk about, you were on Snow Jobs podcast recently, which, shout out to Snow Jobs. I definitely listen to them and they put out some good content, but you were talking specifically, one thing you said on there that I really wanted to discuss here was getting the most out of your software. And you had made, and forgive me if I'm misquoting a little bit, but I think the heart of what you were saying was you wish clients would really take you up on working with the software a little bit after implementation and coming back like for some more training once you had your hand in it a little bit, because you kind of know what you don't know, you've worked with it, you know how it works for you, and then you're able to, get the most out of it. So kind of build on what you were talking about there. And, if you could recommend to clients what's the way to get the most out of this software, what should they be doing?
Yeah, so I would even take one step further back from that, just as they're vetting. You may already have a tool that you like, and you just have a understanding that you need to probably work with your team more to get them up to speed. But if you're in the process of looking for a platform right now, or if you're going to be, in the future, one thing I would recommend doing is at the very beginning, being extremely realistic with yourself and with your team about what you A, actually need, and then B, what can be implemented. The best software you will ever use is the one that your employees also use. It doesn't matter what the tools look like on the back end if no one uses it on the front end. So you're not going to get the output that you think, or maybe that's being conveyed to you by the person like me selling to you on the platform, if no one on your team uses it in the field, or even in the office. So if you want all of the nice whiz bang features, you do have to have this understanding that this will take some commitment to make sure your team not only knows how to use it, but understands why you are using it. For us, that's something that we do run into every now and then, especially with features like geolocation. I think there's a lot of folks that they're not crazy about you knowing where they're physically located, but once our clients' users understand that we are not tracking any of their locations while they're not on site, and the main reason for our users to be tracking that information anyway is purely for liability. I don't think, plenty of folks probably do, but I'm sure there's still plenty of people who don't understand how, the company you're working for may be paying so much in insurance you couldn't even really fathom the number. And the amount of money that they have to pay out for a slip and fall claim can be even higher. So it's a very real problem, and it goes beyond just the operational problems that they're experiencing every single day. These are like company killing and absolutely vibe killing instances when you do get a slip and fall claim, or you just see your insurance rates rocket up because of an incident the following year. So that's one part of it. But then as far as the training goes, what I would always recommend doing is before you broadcast this idea or this new tool that you've implemented fully out to all of your employees, do your best. Again, I fully understand that you do not have 40 hours a week to commit to a new software platform. I get that. I think everyone understands that. But if you can understand what it does and how it should function and which problem you're really trying to solve, that goes a long way in getting buy-in from your team to use it. If you can very clearly articulate to them, this is why we're doing it. I see behind you, you have your sign of, the my why. Well, it's a little bit similar to that. It's, if you know your why, it's not easy necessarily, but it becomes much easier and the obstacles become much easier to navigate. when you really understand why you're doing this in the first place and what outcome you're seeking. So by doing that, you can then bring that to your employees and hopefully get more buy-in than you would if it's just like a hard launch into, hey, we're using this thing, download this app, figure out how to use it. Here's a video. You know, that's not a great way to kick it off, obviously. And yeah, and make sure if you think you may, I don't want to say struggle is probably not the right word, but if you think there are going to be hiccups along the way, make sure you're going with a platform that does offer training, whether it's free or paid. Ours is free. That's a shameless plug. But but you know, training is important for a big tool, and you will use smaller tools that don't necessarily need a whole lot of training, and that's okay. You know, there will be these ancillary software services that you pay a few dollars for each month. I'll take like even Netflix as an example, where it's pretty user friendly. You log in, you click on, you know, which login you would like, and then you just type in the name of the show and you hope that they have it, and you hit play. Well, there's some stuff that requires more steps than that and more learning. And do not be afraid ever to go back and ask the company that you're paying money to show you how to use that tool. A lot of them will have tons of video already that they can just very quickly send you that's going to show you exactly how this product is supposed to work, or this specific tool. Ask for that information. They have written documentation too, if you are a person who prefers to read rather than watch video, though those people seem to be going away at a rapid clip. But you know, any serious software company will also have written documentation too around what you should or should not do with a specific tool. And then lastly, in-person training, or we call it in-person, but it's like this, it's virtual. But you get to talk one-on-one with a full-time employee. You know, it's not a contractor that doesn't know anything about the platform. It's a full-time person who understands not only your problem, but how the platform actually works. And we try to be as flexible as possible too in showing you how you can do certain things different if your company operates a different way. I don't think I've talked to a single company over the last 5 or 6 years that operates the same as another one. So there are certainly things that you may not even be exposed to yet in the initial demo or even in the initial training that you can do just because maybe you didn't know that that was a problem. So the reason I always recommend a second training is because you, in a lot of instances, don't even know what questions you have until you begin using a platform in the field. It's really easy on our end as a company that sells software to show you the main thing, or the main problem that we solve, and it's really easy to do an initial onboarding, taking all of your data and putting it in there and showing you how to get that information in there. What's much more difficult on our end is, you know, we try to ask a ton of questions, and I understand that can get annoying, but we try to understand the problem and how it needs to be solved. But until you go out and use it and you experience like a specific instance where something worked one way and you had hoped that it would work another, I can't tell you how many times it actually does work that way if you just ask how to do it. You know, so don't ever think, and again, this is not just a Yeti specific example. This is with any platform you may be using. If you're seeing something that you would like to work a little bit differently, just ask. It may already work that way. There might just be a different way to go about getting to that solution. So don't ever be afraid to reach out and ask for help. That is what you are paying that company for, more than just the ability to use the platform they've built and to, you know, use their data warehousing that they're paying an astronomical amount for, frankly. That's available to you. It should be available to you. So if you have questions, ask the questions and be prepared to bring those answers back to your own team.
Yeah, really good summary. So I guess if I could kind of break that down, because I try to break things down in like training takeaways from my side, which is the fun part of doing this, because it's like, okay, how are you going to do a training when you're picking it up on the fly from a conversation? But I think the two takeaways I would say, and feel free to add if, you know, or clarify any, but I think number one is, before you're buying software, you know your needs, ask yourself what problem you're trying to solve. Also know your audience and know, you know, what bandwidth do they have, both, knowledge wise, experience wise, comfort level to implement something, because you don't want to throw a bunch of bells and whistles at somebody that isn't quite there. So definitely know your needs and kind of walk through. I would also add map out your processes, since you shameless plugged, I'll shameless plug here. In the October issue of Snow Business, I actually wrote an article about that, about kind of, called Map It Out, where it was talking more from the HR hiring side and, people management side, but kind of know what your process is now and map out where the pain points are, so that like you said, what problem you're trying to solve. You don't go in there and just say, oh, we want something to make us work more efficiently or make things better. But it's like, this is how we currently do things. Here's where it's taking a lot of time. Here's where we're struggling. Can you help us solve that problem? So I think mapping that out, and knowing what you're trying to solve. And then number two, you said, is have that follow-up training. Once you're in there and you learn things about the software that you didn't know, even from implementation, because now you're working with it, you're seeing how it interacts with your company, you're seeing how people digest it, come back with that. And I would totally agree with that, because one of the things from the people side I'm passionate about, DISC personality profile. I'm certified in that. I've done it with several companies. But one thing I always tell to, I don't know if you're familiar with DISC or not, but I always tell people who are like C personalities, which is like detail oriented, task focused, usually people like software developers, accountants, people that are very want to have everything figured out before they make the next move, is sometimes the information you need is on the other side of a move. So, for example, in this case, sometimes the information you need to do your job the most efficiently or get the most out of, say, Yeti, is on the other side of implementing and actually working with it in the field, seeing how it interacts. Like, you're not,
Yeah.
some people I think get afraid to pull the trigger over here, because it's like, well, I don't know everything before I get here. But you have to get beyond here, because some more of the information's on the other side of the door. So it's almost like you have to make the best decision with the info you have now, but know you're going to collect more info on the other side of that door, and then go through and, have those. And to me, feedback, I always say feedback's like playing the game with a cheat code. Like, I definitely tell people, get feedback, hear how it's working for your employees, what's working, not, because those first line users, I think that's a level in any business that sometimes can be forgotten or overlooked. But man, if you get first line feedback and really cater to your, first front line, whether it's, those in the field working with the software, those in your office working with it hands on, that really shows, not only helps make how you use the software better, helps you become better as a business, but from a human side, it really shows that at work their opinions count, and people whose opinions count are going to show up more. They're going to go the extra mile more. They're going to really creatively solve that problem. So it adds fuel to them there too. So it's really kind of a win-win-win in all. But with those two takeaways, kind of, one, being prepared, knowing what problem you're trying to solve, and mapping your process out and as is. And then number two, having that follow-up training. Anything else you'd add to that from your side, Bart?
No, I don't think so. I mean, to me, the two biggest, well, if there's some simple things. So, and you had mentioned earlier even about giving yourself some grace. I think the only other thing that I would mention is, if your employees in the field, they're not totally enthusiastic about it, they're not totally bought into the process, if you can at a minimum get them to begin using the tools correctly, that's a win. Like, they don't have to be a champion of the product. If they're using it correctly and they're not miserable about doing it, I tell people, I have PDFs that explain basically what you need to do with the mobile app from the time you start your shift until you end the shift. And I tell everyone, look, just, you can print this out and keep it in each truck. If a person isn't going to be hanging on your every word while you're doing an in-person training, that's just people. I mean, that's not even really a knock on them. That's just kind of, especially in snow, where you may have a lot of part-time employees. They come to a training at 7 o'clock at night. They've, had work all day long. They might be putting off or missing a kid's or basketball practice or whatever it may be to be there. They've got other things on their mind. So give them the tools that they can use to succeed, even if they're not overly optimistic about using it. So if someone shows up to the training and they're just totally disengaged, you may still have a great employee on your hands that just had a bad night. And if that's the case, just print that sheet out, keep it in the truck. They can figure it out. They're adults and they're generally smart people. They'll figure it out. Don't be so hard on yourself if they're not gung ho right at the beginning, because they may just trying to process it as well.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I think that's just general good wisdom. And even for myself, I can say, because I'm somebody who like can, especially when I'm passionate about something, can be like, I mean, launching a new podcast right now. It's like,
Yeah.
Podcast, but realizing that, hey, look, there's other podcasts out there. Things build slow. You got to build trust. And also I'm launching, I picked the least busy time of the year for snow removal to launch the podcast, which that's obviously a joke because I didn't, so, but having that grace to kind of slowly build and just be like, hey, look, somebody listened today. That's great. Got a couple downloads. Awesome. Somebody shared about it, so we're on recording, like all those, build those little wins and recognize people for those wins too. Appreciate, because I think at work, even we all have stuff in our jobs that we don't necessarily want to do, but have to do. But I think when we're recognized and appreciated, it's a spoonful of sugar that makes the medicine go down. It's like, it's a lot easier than just, grabbing them by the hair and be like, here, new software. It's like, hey, no, this ain't your favorite, but you did everything right. We were able to build a customer correctly. I really appreciate you doing that, because then the next time they see it, it's like, hey, you know what? Boss appreciates it. I think that just goes a lot further when you put that human appreciation behind it for your team, as opposed to, okay, forcing it down.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, you got to kind of meet people where they are sometimes.
Gotcha. So sometimes software's like, when it works fine, nobody's calling to say thank you. But when it doesn't work, they're like, it's kind of like the offensive line in football. When they're blocking, nobody, nobody notices. But when they get a holding penalty or they miss a block and the quarterback gets drilled, they're like, man, that guy's terrible, So I think sometimes snow fighters can be the same way. It's like when it's clear and you're driving, again, back to the 16-year-old, 20 young adults. Sorry to pick on the young adults on this one, but when you're driving, bumping your music and the lot's clear, you don't think about it. But when it's all, snowy everywhere and you're sliding, you're like, man, they did a crap job on this today. So I wanted to kind of flip that and
software
recognize
and snow removal are very much the left tackle of a 400-yard passing game. It's just like no one even noticed that the guy just played on his head the whole game, and the quarterback has the game of a lifetime, but that's not all him. And you're exactly right. Snow removal's the exact same way. You're not getting any calls from anyone in the city saying, hey, great job on the parking lot at the local Target. It's why wasn't this 7 square feet cleared off as soon as I pulled in, So it can be frustrating, but as long as you understand that's the game, that's all right.
Yeah. And kind of as we're wrapping up here, I think just a final encouragement I'd throw to people based off what you said is, being that, I love that analogy, the left tackle, the 400-yard game. It's like nobody's calling out and throwing their name up like, oh, record passing game, but I think, with that, as from a people side, that's where it really is, snow companies, it's on us and even anybody in the industry. Like it's on us to recognize each other. It's on us to encourage each other. It's on us to, thank each other. So I appreciate you not just coming on here, but what you do for the industry, for your customers, to educate, to be at SIMA, to educate, be on snow jobs and all that stuff. Because I look at it this way, at the end of the day, it's us against the storm. So, we got to keep that us strong. And, the us of the snow industry won't always see eye to eye on the way to solve problems or the way to move forward, but I think at the end of the day we've got to really, when we're doing stuff right, call us out in a positive way for what we're doing. So any kind of final words from you, Bart? Anything either people should know, where they can reach you? Floor is yours to close here.
Train your people, they'll pay you back dividends. If you want to have a look at Yeti, you can reach me. You can send me an email, bart@yetisoftware.com. You can also give me a call. if you want to book a demo, you can go to our website as well. It's just yetisoftware.com. In the right-hand side, there's a link that you can go to, pick a day and time that works for you, and I'll just show you around the entire platform. And again, we will talk too about the problems that you face. So we try to learn as much about your problem before we even really get going there. But yeah, I'd love to, if you're thinking about it, love to see if we can help you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this has been NetGain, Networking Encouragement and Training. Evan Tashwire, Bart Huber, thank you for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Here. Appreciate you having me on.
Weather, but you ain't gonna slip and fall with that. Why? Cause we snow fighters, we assaulting that. Get it, salting that. King need the salting round. Clown brokers and